Okay, good morning, everyone. Just a big thank you to Joe for inviting me to speak today on behalf of them, and perhaps to share with you our experiences in terms of not just with identity management, but also around working in the shared services partners in the public sector. So we had a challenge, as many local authorities have, around, it's been in the news for a number of years now around the austerity measures that have been placed on local government. And we've gone from coping with austerity now to, if you like, adapting to austerity because it's here to stay. And we had a challenge, and both Wigan and Bolton Council decided to come together to do a joint procurement along with two other partners from Wigan. And deliver basically ICT transformation a totally different way while saving money. And that our shared services partner is Agilysys in that. So platform delivery in 2003 when the contract started, it seems like a long time ago now, and when we talk about the Windows XP, it certainly is a long time ago now. Was traditionally fat desktops across Bolton, a very non-agile approach, and laptops. Remote access was achieved through a Citrix ICA farm in which applications were published. Again, in Wigan, similar but different technologies. Terminal Services 2003, that we all know and love, and XP, and a mix of Blackberries and iPads and some emerging technologies in both areas. And again, looking at around 8,000 sort of 500 users at the start of that. But obviously, we were aware that was going to shrink over time. So obviously, in particular respect to remote access, number of organisations coming together, you'd expect quite a few solutions and a lot of disconnect between those solutions. And I think our mantra is quite simple, really. It was standard by default, different by exception. So what we try and do is that we standardise, from economies of scale piece, but recognise that, both authorities, albeit neighbouring authorities, do actually operate in slightly different ways in some instances. So we had, I'm not going to go through all the technologies, but we had TS Gateway, Natilla, and then a mix of different VPN solutions, but predominantly token-based two-factor where it existed, didn't exist everywhere, and smart cards, in particular, linked to sort of PSN, particular users there, and GCSX users. So a pretty sort of, if you like, old world solution. That would have been fantastic and fit for purpose at the time, but obviously things moved on. So in 2014, as part of our piece that we did around our PSN submission, we recognised that we needed two-factor authentication. We were quite late in Wigan coming to the game with this when I started the back end of 2013 with this current role. And what we did basically is we went out to look for a more new world two-factor authentication system. So back in 2014, which is only a few years ago now, there was not great amounts around that would support our outcome requirements. But we ended up trialling Duo as our two-factor piece, which then provided access to the 2008 and 2003 gateway servers. So a little bit about the transformation. We've moved from a very static workforce, paper-based in a lot of areas, to a hot desk environment that you'd expect these days. Our two main town hall buildings are now completely hot desking, thin client-based on there. And obviously there's more and more drive now for mobile and home working. There's a great deal of it already happening in various forms. I think one of the things that has changed over the time is the thin to fat ratio. We were aiming for a 60% thin to fat ratio to start with and move that over to around 90%. But what's happened in the meantime is the hybrid device disruptions, like to refer to it. So obviously the introduction of things like Surface Pros and Spectras and these sort of Windows-based hybrid devices. So that really came along during our transformation and made us actually think and change our delivery of what we were looking at doing. There's a couple of technical pieces for those who are interested, is that we've got just over 5,000 concurrent licenses that we deliver VDI through on Windows 7 to our users, and we use Synapse for delivery. I'm not going to the other things. One thing to mention there is around Windows mobile phones. So we're deploying them now with MDM technology, which is replacing the BlackBerry and some of the old estate in Bolton as well. The big piece I wanted just to cover really is the remote access solution and how we've adapted that with this changing environment around some of these hybrid devices. So basically what we've done is, this is the diagram as it exists now, is we've taken all of those remote access solutions, TS Gateways and Tiller, with the legacy aged infrastructure, and we've replaced that with Pulse Secure, which is a Juniper product, with Duo that sits in between that for the two-factor piece. And that connects to, obviously, our VDI estate, so people from home, depending on the category of using the type of data they ask, can use either home machines or corporately provided equipment. We've also deployed a Pulse VPN client against all of our corporate mobile devices, again, with a piece with Duo, just so that they can access and they get an on-net experience, basically, when they're tethered. So a very simple approach, nothing too groundbreaking, but actually I think the piece is really sort of more around the adoption and around the users. By standardizing and by doing that, users are really having a really good experience now using Duo. So this is our sort of partnership page. Just thought I'd give some context to this. So again, this is more of a user-based sort of presentation that I thought I'd bring to you today, is that they enter traditionally using Active Directory services you'd expect. And then this is the window they get up. So very simple. But really effective. And I think one of the main things, what we find in local government, is that not one solution fits all. We have a range of around 700 services per authority that run out. We do everything from adult social care to cutting grass to running libraries and sports centres. There's so vast a range of services that a local authority provides. When you particularly look around some of the adult social care and the health side, they have some particular challenges as well around going out and working in people's homes and working with vulnerable people. If you look from like a schools and education perspective, they're limited. They can't use mobile phones in the classroom, things like this. So what Duo really gives us, and if you like, is just that multi-authentication piece. So I'll give you some examples here. Obviously, you'll be quite familiar with these, but even down to Apple Watch integration. And I think, we have quite a few sort of people within local government who consider themselves quite new world, the millennials, they're quite technical, so they really do actually enjoy using two-factor authentication, which is kind of really an oddity. It's two things that should never really go together, to be fair, from a user perspective. But that's what we've been focused on. So as you can see, there are a number of ways, and even the old token way, which can be deployed into classrooms or into environments where you can't have that mobile phone at your side. I just wanted to give you a couple of very, very quick videos just to show you the experience that you get on the Duo. So this is an unlocked iPhone. This is a live demo of my phone from last week. When you authenticate through our Juniper solution, it basically logs you in once you've authenticated and pressed the green button. And then even from a locked state, and again, this works over not just iPhone, but multi-vendors in terms of Microsoft and Android as well, is even from the lock screen, you can approve that either using the passcode or, in this case, the fingerprint. And it's that simple, really, for us. So we recognise that sometimes there's a need, again, to provide the tokens, to look at ways in which we can make sure that everyone can use it appropriately in the environment they access. But again, for the users who have the facility, we can use push technology, and it works that well. And obviously, they would then get into the access portal. So kind of what's next for us? Well, what we've noticed is that with a new solution that's coming on board, and we're just about finishing rollout now of this across all the user base, is that people really like it. And that's what's key, really, is that they don't mind using the two-factor authentication piece. They bought into it. And when users particularly buy into things, what you notice is that the ownership is there. And this is part of a strategy for us to start to evolve our staff and ensure that they start to take more ownership for their actions, working remotely, not just from a login on a password point of view, but from a data point of view as well, because there is a lot associated with the type of data and information governance. And again, the more that staff buy into what you're doing, the more that they'll respond positively. Obviously, like many, we're looking at BYOD. Whilst people can log on from home through this solution, we don't have full BYOD yet. But again, more and more people want to use that, and we want to support that going forwards. So we're looking at Duo as a platform which has more features around checking, for instance, what network that person has logged on to, where the location is. We're going to be moving to Office 365 during this financial year. And again, that's changing from having that private cloud that we've got in our shared Tier 2 data centre at the moment to starting embracing the cloud in a much bigger way. So whilst we've got little elements in the cloud at the moment, this is going to be a big all-out of email services in particular and some SharePoint. And again, we want Duo to support us in the two-factor and some of the stuff that the platform will bring along in that as well. And just in general, obviously, between now and 2020 is that if we dialogued in 2011, 2012 for the solution we have, and once we've got a private cloud, that was the right thing at the time. Now it seems kind of an absurd idea going forwards. And more services now will be consumed, whether it be software, whether it be platform, infrastructure, all the variants of cloud. We're seeing more and more bids and tenders now coming back with that technology quite rightly. And what I'm keen that we have is one method of authentication, particularly around that second factor. So just why Duo for us, really. These are some simple things, consumption-based, so there's no upfront costs. It's typical utility-based modelling. That was really good for us because often, there's a long piece to go through around ensuring that investment that you're making is going to ring true. But for us, we could just try this. It's available on G-Cloud and other frameworks. But it's flexible, it's scalable. One of the main concerns that we have is around an emergency situation where, for instance, we call it snow day in Wigan, whereby there's an inch of snow and nobody can move. So we know this happens now and then. And Duo allows us basically to flex up and flex down very, very quickly, simply, without any issue or even cost to some of that if it's for a very short period. Obviously, we've got multiple AD for this and domain support. We wanted one instance of Duo across the partnership. It's been managed centrally, and Duo can do all of that. Obviously, the multi-authentication option's been through. But the key thing for me is this two-factor approach. We want one solution across the piece. The vendors that Duo worked with back in 2014, when we first got it, was vast. It's even vaster now. And that gives us some assurances going forward that we continue to use that technology as that gateway point. And again, with the platform Duo that we're going to be looking at, there's more and more granularity around what you can do, particularly around BYOD, which is what we're looking at next. I'm probably the third person to mention the EU, so controversial point. I should have thought about this actually the day before the referendum that I was speaking about it, but it's in an EU data centre. I'm sure that'll be an interesting point after tomorrow, and obviously comprehensive in reporting. But most important for me really is that we have now secure yet happy users. We've been victim to small instances of authentication issues down to not having two-factor authentication, and in a number of instances now is that Duo has obviously stepped in and saved us from some of that. And I think that's what it's about. Users are consumers. IT's been consumerized completely. It's very much commodity-based now. And what we want to do and what my sort of strategy is making sure that we can give the users an appropriate experience to the risk that's posed, and that we can give them as close to a home type solution as possible. And it should be transparent to them. They shouldn't need to think too much about security. They should take ownership for their actions. They should think about the data that they're handling. But in terms of security, the tech side, really, we want it to be transparent and invisible to them. So that's me. Thank you for listening.